Welcome into the inverted microphone. My name is Rees Goodall. I'm joined here with the great, my mate, and usually late, Joa'o Lara Jr. Joa'o Lara, on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon, how are you doing, buddy?
Happy to be here. I mean, once again, I've mentioned it last couple of episodes. Club football, get out of the way. We're getting closer to the World Cup. We're only 8 days now from Mexico kicking off against South Africa, if I'm not wrong, in the World Cup. If I messed up, you know what? It's okay. Mistakes happen. But Mexico's kicking off in 8 days, and I'm ecstatic. I feel like a little kid again, waiting for those days just for the World Cup to come. And you wake up that morning and it's like Christmas morning. I just can't wait.
Well, Joa'o, I can't believe you didn't fully remember it was Mexico, South Africa to start this World Cup, because that is World Cup heritage. Happened in 2010, happening again in 2026. But that's later on in this order of business on the inverted microphone. We open things up with a little chat about the Champions League final that just took place. PSG winning on penalties. I forget the margin on penalties, but it was 1-1 in 120 minutes. Some transfers have been made, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Manchester United spending some cash, setting themselves in an interesting position. And then, of course, the World Cup preview. This will be part one of our World Cup preview. We'll be back next week with part two, right before the World Cup starts on Thursday. So we're going to preview the first half of the groups. So that is, I believe it's 6. How many groups are there? 12 groups of 4. So there's 6 groups we'll talk about today, A through F. G through L will be next week. And then also next week, we will do our predictions for the week, or not the week, the World Cup in general. Give you our dark horse, give you our potential champion. So that way we can't take backsies on our predictions. But Champions League final, that's enough with the rundown. Champions League final happened on Saturday morning if you live in the United States, and really if you live in Phoenix, Arizona, like I do. If you live in Tucson, Arizona, it happens in the morning, but like 40 years ago. That's a joke about Tucson. It's not being great. But 4-3 on penalty win. I remember now. Just kidding. Thought mob's on my second monitor. PSG win their second consecutive Champions League, second Champions League in history, robbing Arsenal of their opportunity to win their first Champions League. Joa'o, match took place in Hungary. What were your thoughts on all of it?
Well, look, I think that after Arsenal scored that first goal, it was a little bit difficult for Paris to try to break them down, just because Arsenal, again, defensively the whole season, they were great. Now, look, there were a couple of controversial calls in the game. Rees, I know you're going to go into depth about them, so I don't want to touch them. I want you to give more your opinion on them. But really, Paris sort of ended up growing as the game went on. Started controlling possession more. Started trying to deal more danger towards the end. And honestly, I was scared in the last corner kick of the game, because it was at a time. Arsenal, obviously, very good with set pieces. I thought Arsenal was going to go ahead and win it last minute, honestly.
Yeah, it was definitely a possibility. It would have been very of the script for that to go ahead and happen. But I mean, I think before we go on to the potential controversy, I'd like to just kind of go through the match as a whole. First 5 minutes, nothing really happened until that Kai Havertz goal, which came exactly why you play Kai Havertz in this game. The reason is because he can take advantage of moments like that, moments in transition where Arsenal are pushing forward. I thought he had taken one too many touches, to be honest with you, but he puts himself at a very difficult angle, finishes it. It's a poor effort from Safonov in net for PSG, but 1-0 from there for Arsenal. And then that is where we saw Arsenal play their best game. And it's not because they were playing this beautiful open football, creating a whole bunch of chances. It was rather the opposite. It was because they allowed PSG to come at them and they stifled them from the 5th minute, really until the 65th minute, and then beyond that. It was such a phenomenal defensive performance from Arsenal in this match, and it's really unfortunate that the way they concede had to be a penalty, had to be a needless foul from Christian Mosquera, because I mean the first half of play, PSG did not look like they had a clue as to how to break this low block down. I mean, they finished the first half with only 6 shots, one of which was on target. They outpassed Arsenal in the first half 347 to 105. By the end of the game, that mark was quite high, 889 to 285 in the passing department. That doesn't even include completed passes. So I think I'm a little bit of a sicko. I like watching teams defend like this. I think, an 8 out of 10 attacks better than an 8 out of 10 defense, but a 10 out of 10 defense is miles better than a 10 out of 10 attack, because you get to see the attack just get so frustrated, so just unpleased with how things are going. They can't quite figure out a way to break Arsenal down. And I really thought that the goal would have never come if Mosquera doesn't take Dembele down. Which again, as I mentioned before, it's unfortunate from an Arsenal perspective.
Yeah, again, I think you say this perfectly right. And look, I like to see action in my games. I like to see goals. I think good goals in a high intensity match. I think that's the best there can be. But I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not going to completely disagree. Yes, a 10 out of 10 defense is better than a 10 out of 10 attack, and it's just we've seen 10 out of 10 attacks over the years. I think MSN was one of them. MSN in their peak was the best thing to watch if you wanted to watch goals, if you wanted to watch creativity, if you wanted to watch sheer geniuses. That was beautiful. But nowadays the game is shifting, right? And defense has become such a big thing. And how fullbacks press, how fullbacks run, how fullbacks pass. It continues to grow. So I mean, I understand your perspective from that point, but I totally agree that foul from Mosquera absolutely unnecessary. Again, just so disappointing to see a team like Arsenal, who hadn't lost in the Champions League, just coming from winning the Premier League. They worked so hard. Unfortunately, it wasn't for them. But I wouldn't be, against saying, hey, Arsenal could be in this spot same time next year, but you really need to help that attack out, because you bring in, Gabriel Martinelli and Noni Madueke at the end of the game trying to have some impact. You don't get that. Bukayo Saka doesn't really show up in this game. You need to have at least one player who's there, will show up, and at least help out, either send balls in the boxes or cause that disruption and be a big time player, because Arsenal was missing it offensively, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and I don't even think it can be considered an opinion. I think it's factual, to be honest with you. The wingers from Arsenal were dreadful in this match, and that adjective is far too polite to describe their performance. Bukayo Saka, 0 of 4 on dribbles, did not complete a cross, did not create a chance, did not take a shot on or off target. Did have one blocked. Trossard gets the assist on Kai Havertz's goal, so his FOTMOB rating's a little bit higher than it probably should be. But I think from an Arsenal perspective, the one thing that you could take out of this match as something that, hey, to be back in this spot next year, we need to change. And it's that front three, right? You can debate, the Kai Havertz, Victor Gyökeres, who's the better 9. Personally, I prefer Kai Havertz in that spot. Not only can he score, but he can also assist. But the wingers, if Saka's not playing well, and you have Leandro Trossard, the Gabriel Martinelli, you've got Noni Madueke who can play on the left. That left-hand side is brutal. That is not a left-hand side that is worthy of winning the Premier League and or the Champions League, right? Arsenal are certainly going to have to make a decision there. We'll talk about some of the rumors in a minute. So I think they need to make a move there. Some of the moves kind of see them getting a new 10 as well. And I mean, with how Martin Odegaard played in this game, if you had watched this performance from Martin Odegaard 3 years ago when Arsenal were in the middle of their first title run, which they came in second in by the end of the season, you would not believe that that is the same player, because Martin Odegaard, a handful of years ago, was creative. He was dynamic. He was trying things out constantly. Now, it feels like he is one of those characters from that Nike advert in 2014 World Cup where they take the players' personalities away and just turn them into robots. That's what Martin Odegaard feels like in 2026. And unfortunately for Arsenal, as good as those robots were, they need somebody that would be that creative engine. And yes, they have Eze, but is Eze good enough to be a starter in this role? I don't know. I don't think so. I think he's good enough to be a squad player. I think he's good enough to get consistent minutes, but I don't think he's good enough to be the out and out number 10 week in and week out.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, a position like that in a club like Arsenal is so difficult. And it's so horrible to see Martin Odegaard be a shell of his former self, basically. I remember the conversations of comparisons to Kevin De Bruyne, to Bruno Fernandes, who's the best 10 in the Premier League. And we just don't see that from him anymore. So look, Arsenal has been doing better with trying to spend money, with trying to support their players, with supporting Mikel Arteta and everyone involved into making this a competent project. We've seen it this year with the Premier League, but they need to spend some money on an 8, 10, whatever you want to define that position or role that Martin Odegaard is in, and you need to invest for someone in the future, because here's the thing, right? Martin Odegaard is already 27 years old. Yes, it's not exactly 30. Yes, he should statistically be in his best years of his career, but you need to start looking at someone that, hey, is going to be able to take over that position in a year, 2, maybe 3 years time, really, if you have that level of comfort that you're looking for, which I think that Arsenal doesn't in that department. To take over, change the game, and be a leader for Arsenal for years to come.
I agree. And it is certainly a difficult position to be in because Martin Odegaard is your captain. This is a guy who is highly respected within the Arsenal dressing room, within the training ground. It's certainly a difficult position to be in when your captain is underperforming like this. I mean, I don't doubt that he's a great leader, but it leaves you in a bad spot. Looking at his last 4 seasons, right? So the 4 seasons that Arsenal have been in the title race. The first season in the Premier League, 37 games played, 15 goals scored, and 7 assists, 22 goal contributions. No complaining there. Year after, 35 games played, 8 goals, 10 assists. Again, no complaining there. Last season, 3 goals and 8 assists in 30 appearances. So the goals take a little bit of a drop. Assists take a little tiny drop, but nothing really to concern about. This season, he did deal with injury, which certainly plays a little bit of a part. In 24 games, 1 goal and 6 assists. Not the creative output that you want to see from a guy who just a handful of years ago was delivering 22 goal contributions in the Premier League for you. It's a bad spot to be in. I understand, again, the injuries have been there, but I just think Arsenal would be better off in terms of how they would play if they got a new guy. I don't care about the leadership aspect in terms, I mean, I do care about the leadership aspect. It's just, I think that's not, I'm not going to break that down. They have been linked with a handful of players, and we'll transition to our transfer talk. It's not the only transfer talk we'll get into. I alluded to the Manchester United moves, but Arsenal have been heavily linked with Morgan Rogers. We know that he is a good mate of Bukayo Saka, as is Noni Madueke, so, judge that as you would. But bringing in Morgan Rogers, it sounds like it's going to be a heck of a transfer fee, one with so many commas I don't even want to know. I mean, it's money that Joa'o and I, quite frankly, will never see. But hey, I think my thing with Morgan Rogers is he is very similar to Eze in the sense that of the positions he can play, right? He can play on the left wing, he can play as a 10. But I feel like nobody really knows what position is best for him. Morgan Rogers, another issue of his is that he's not a great passer, right? He is much better in that almost Kai Havertz role as a 10, where he is able to combine with others, not necessarily create chances for them, but be the benefactor of these chances created, score goals, which would be half of what Martin Odegaard used to bring for this team, but it wouldn't be all the way. And then the left wing aspect of it, I personally believe he's a little bit better on the left wing just because you don't need to rely on him to create the chances. I mean, he had 6 assists in the Premier League, but he just has never had that full season. I know 10 assists last year, but I just think he's not as good of a passer as what Arsenal need. And then from then, to me, it's just where do you go for a 10? Because the left wing position, they've been linked with other players as well. Bradley Barcola, they've been linked with Junior or Eli Junior Krupi, who can play there, play as a 9, versatile option. I'm sure Mikel Arteta is drooling over him. But I don't know if you go Morgan Rogers, you want him to be your number 10.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? Players, that are so versatile, I think at some point in their career they have to decide on a specific position. Why? Because I think it's great that you can play in so many positions at a high level, but when you're going to be placed in a project like Arsenal's that's already established, that needs a player in a specific role, you need to be able to, hey, you go there, you're going to play that position, and you're going to establish yourself there. Because as good as it is, sometimes it's a curse as well, because you're like, oh, well, this guy can play so many positions. Where do we play him? He needs to be defined somewhere. But I'm not against that move. I think that he's a player that can help Arsenal exponentially in that department. Offensively minded, and honestly, I love the way he plays the game of football. So I think he wouldn't be a bad move for the Gunners if it does end up concreting.
Yeah, it's the move that or sorry, let me rephrase that. It's a move that signals they want to run it back next season. They're not just going to take this championship win and be like, oh, okay, fine, we can lay off for a little bit, and good for them because next season, under my current predictions, the Premier League is going to be much, much weaker. And I think that's a fair assessment given, some of the moves that are being made in the managerial sphere and in the transfer sphere as well. The other name that I'd like to bring up is Bradley Barcola. We did see him in this Champions League final. I mentioned him a little bit earlier, but I like a little bit of a more nuanced talk about him. Oh, Joa'o, lamp on. Ooh, I like that.
I found it.
You
I was looking
found
for
it.
the button. I was looking for the button. I couldn't find it. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
Okay. You look like Martin Odegaard trying to create chances there. All right. Well, good for you finding the lamp. What we're talking about, Bradley Barcola. That's who. He's not the most favored player by Luis Enrique. Doesn't start a whole bunch of matches, and you can kind of tell why when he comes onto the pitch because the dribbling is great, the chance creation is great. He finished the season with 13 goals, 8 assists in 55 appearances across all competitions. That does include 6 Club World Cup games, so it's really 49 appearances, 13 goals, and 6 assists. But this game kind of signaled the problems with a player like Bradley Barcola. Is he comes on, he creates a couple of opportunities, doesn't get counted as a chance, but the shots he takes are mind-boggling bad. And it's not like he creates these opportunities, takes a touch too many, takes a touch the wrong direction, and sets himself up for a bad shot. I feel like his finishing ability is just so poor. I don't know if you want a guy like that in an Arsenal side next season.
Yeah, and it's just, again, it's very difficult, right? Because when you're in a position like Arsenal, you can't say, "Hey, we need this guy to be sporadic." If you're going to play for Arsenal, if you're going to sign for Arsenal, it's because you're going to show up. If you're not in the starting 11, if you're not going to be someone, who's on that team sheet, you're going to come off the bench. You're going to make an impact. If you're playing for Arsenal next season, you have to be close to perfection because that's what you're going to be try. That's what you're going to try to strive for. At the end of the day, you lose some of the cups this year. Yes, they're not important as the Premier League, but you've won the Premier League. You want to win the cups. You want to win the Champions League. You want to win it all. Why? Because when you're able to consolidate trophies like that, like if they're Infinity Stones, you consolidate yourself as the best team in Europe, if not the best team in the world. And you need to be perfect. Arsenal needs to be perfect. I think depth wise, they're okay. But again, totally agree with you. Couldn't be any indifferent with that opinion.
Yeah. I agree. Okay, now other teams have made transfers. Arsenal aren't the only team that have gone out. Well, and no, actually, that's not even true. Other teams have made transfers. Arsenal haven't made any signing yet. We'll see. We'll see how that goes for them. We'll have more transfer window talk after the World Cup, maybe during the World Cup, depending on if Cristiano Ronaldo joins Juventus like he did 8 years ago. That was a fun time, wasn't it? Manchester United, rumored with a boatload of midfielders. Pretty much if you've ever played midfield in your life, odds are you're in an article from The Athletic saying you're linked with Manchester United at this moment. Because outside of Bruno Fernandes, that midfield room is not great. Kobbie Mainoo's in there, but is he a guy you want starting? I don't know. That's a conversation to have. The decision is the decision, not a decision. Well, I guess it is a decision. That's a little bit of a fumble bumble. David Ornstein reported he beat Fabrizio Romano to this. So credit to you, David Ornstein. You're way better than Fabrizio, but this one came out of nowhere, which makes it even better. Roughly 45 million euros from Manchester United will be heading to Atalanta to sign Ederson. No, not the Manchester City goalkeeper, the Brazilian midfielder, 26 years old, obviously from Atalanta, but had played there for the last handful of seasons, was at another club in Italy before that, and had bounced around in Brazil. He is very cheap given what Manchester United are targeting in this window. The rumors of Mateus Fernandes, if there's even talks about Elliot Anderson, who is going to be a guy we talk about later. It's definitely a cheap option, but it's an older option. It's one you don't have to wait for. Joa'o, just overall thoughts on what Ederson can bring to Manchester United.
I think he's a bigger improvement. I think he's a big improvement from Manu Ugarte. I really do think that he is a player that not only can actually give a forward pass, but he can also, carry that ball up the pitch, help out Manchester United. I think that he's a player that comes off the bench. Once again, this season for Atalanta, he's been top 86% in forward passes completed, forward pass completion, progressive passes as well. He is in the top 79%. So if we're throwing stats out there, that's really good. But what I like about this transfer more than a Manu Ugarte was known for his work rate and how physical he was in the press, how he was able to go up and down. Premier League is different than Ligue 1, but I do think that Serie A in some way might be more technical in a sense. I think there's a great handful of technical players, and it's a technical league. I think that the Premier League, it's more, physical, not only in strength but in speed. And the way the game is played, it's much faster. So that does worry me about Ederson going to the Premier League. But once again, I think he's a guy who comes on 25 minutes left in the match, 15, 30. He's playing in that second half, and he's just helping Manchester United close out a result. But I do think he is behind whoever Manchester United ends up signing ahead of him. So, for example, that Mateus Fernandes that we'll talk about here in a bit, if United were to sign him, I think he starts ahead of Ederson. Ederson, I don't think sees the starting 11, only in cup fixtures or in fixtures where starters need to be relieved to help with that fixture congestion.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that is going to be interesting to see what direction does Michael Carrick go with his starting 11 next season. looking more at Ederson's statistical profile, he was above average in progressive passes, progressive carries last season with Atalanta compared to the rest of the midfielders in Serie A. That was 6.5 progressive passes a game, and about 1.5 progressive carries per 90. He good passer, solid passer, isn't going to give you a whole bunch in the final third, though. Not a great crosser, doesn't create a whole lot of chances for other teammates, which isn't, he's not obviously the reason you're buying him is not because of the final third, what he can bring there, but it is an interesting little tidbit within the game that he is going to bring to Manchester United. I think my biggest question mark around this transfer, and this is one that I spoke about with you fairly early on after it happened, is, you know, Mateus Fernandez and Ederson are very similar-ish profiles. They're cut from the same cloth, you know, molded into different shapes, absolutely, but effectively, you know, they're very, very similar profiles, right? Ederson is 5 years older, which could make a little bit of a difference, you know, if you're thinking about age, but also how quickly they can adapt to first team football at Manchester United. But I wonder why you would go out and do this when, in my personal opinion, you need a guy who can play next to whoever you sign, right? So what I mean by that is you need a guy who can play next to Ederson or Mateus Fernandez. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, I like Kabi Manu. I think he's a good prospect. I know he's kind of aging out of a prospect and turning into an actual professional. I know he's been professional for a few years, but you get my point. I think if Manchester United are to be serious next season, they need a guy who can play along them in more of, hey, I can do things up and down the pitch, which, you know, Mateus Fernandez is probably a little bit better at doing things up and down the pitch in terms of, you know, his chance creation, but he's not as good as with tackles or carrying the ball. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it.
Look, I think that Mateus Fernandez is a player who has a lot of space and sort of, I'm not going to say a lot of time because he's going to join a major project. He's linked with Liverpool as well. Team Talk reports. I don't know how accurate Team Talk may be in their reporting. Therefore, I'll put that disclaimer out there. But he's going to a big project regardless, whether it's Manchester United, whether it's Liverpool. He doesn't have that time anymore, you know, to grow. I think he has the space to, but I think the games where West Ham really needed someone to show up and you know, be there up and down, recovering balls, trying to create opportunities, trying to create chances, he was there. And especially in the match against Sunderland, watching that match and watching the way he played, if he's able to do this on a week to week basis, in week out basis, where he's going up and down, smacking people in the mouth defensively, giving a good ball, or getting involved in the attack, I think he'll be an asset to whatever team ends up picking him up this transfer window.
I have another question to ask you, and then that revolves around the transfer fee for Mateus Fernandez. It kind of has leaked around that Manchester United wouldn't be happy paying more than 45, 50 million for him. While West Ham, according to the Times, has put a price tag on him at 80 million pounds, which West Ham, please recognize that you were relegated this season. You hold no leverage. But West Ham, effectively, they just want to recoup the transfer fee that they paid prior to the season, which was roughly 42 million, including add-ons, to purchase him from Southampton. Obviously, West Ham's just trying to gain any leverage they can in this negotiation. Maybe hope that, if the transfer fee goes below 60 million, they won't be unhappy. But hey, if they negotiate well enough, they can get to 65. They would be happy. I'm curious to get your thoughts as to where this fee would be or should be as well for West Ham, or not for West Ham to sell, but for Manchester United to purchase Mateus Fernandez and be happy with their decision.
I think, right, if we're putting it in terms of what Manchester United has done already, I love the price tag for Ederson. I think the price tag for Ederson is accurate. I think the price tag it reflects what his value is worth. 45 million nowadays is sort of closer to a 30 a couple of years ago. I really do, just because everything and everyone is so elevated nowadays in price. And we were talking about it with Julian Alvarez a couple of weeks back as well. I think that if Manchester United wants to pick up a player like Mateus Fernandes, they sort of have that leverage because West Ham is going down. So they can play around with it, but they have to be aggressive in their approach because there's other teams involved as well. Now I do think 80 million is a lot. If West Ham were staying in the Premier League, I think 80 million would be a just price, just because he is going to be a player who is key to that project. Not saying he won't be key, but he is not a championship player by any means. So I think that Manchester United, if they end up closing at a 55, 60, highest around 65 million, I think that's a good price tag. Why? Because of his age and because of the potential. And not only that, you have a mentor in the midfield and Bruno Fernandes, and you have that Portuguese and sporting connection as well, that I think it will benefit enough and it will pay dividends eventually whenever he's fully developed and a start in this Manchester United squad, because I do think that he can become one.
One more question for you on this Mateus Fernandez transfer saga, which isn't a transfer saga yet. And I use yet very, very factually because we know how things go around here in the Premier League. But what I was going to say is 100 million roughly might rise to 110 depending on how the dominoes fall on this transfer for Mateus Fernandes to Manchester United on two midfielders. Yes, I know you got roughly 45 million euros for Rasmus Højlund, so that could cover the transfer fee for Ederson. But what do you think United's available budget would be for the rest of the window? I don't think they're going to go for a guy like Elliot Anderson, of course, just because of how that fee is likely to look. But what do you think, United's future moves would be?
I've heard so many price tags and so many budgets thrown around for Manchester United. Look, I don't know what they're at FFP wise. I'm not that knowledgeable with where they're at right now.
It's
I know.
revenue. It's club where they're changing it. It's literally just strictly club revenue minus I think either the wages or spending on, or at least that's PSR. Sorry, PSR is the Premier League. UEFA uses the FAFP. I'm gonna research this while you chat.
So, look, again, if it's based off of income or whatever United may be gaining in revenue, they are a global brand. They are one of the biggest sports teams around the world in terms of branding and marketing, because that's one of the only things the Glazers were able to do well. They were able to plaster that logo everywhere. So money's coming in from a lot of places. Now, with that being said, I would not be surprised if Manchester United wants to be a serious project this year. I would not be surprised if they spend anywhere within the ranges of 200 to max 300 million pounds, euros, whatever you want to call it. I think if they want a serious project, if they actually want to find the depth that they want in order to be a competitive team next season and at least try to compete for cups, maybe not the Premier League yet, I think they are going to go out and spend that egregious amount of money, and they've done it before. So that's where I'm not concerned in this team spending money, but I think this team is finally going to be able to spend money wisely and bring in an array of players that can change this side.
Okay, to clarify, financial fair play versus the squad cost rule, and PSR as well. PSR is actually going away after this season. They're replacing it with the squad cost ratio, which rules that your squad cost, so that includes The contract, transfer fee, signing fees, and that doesn't even include. Sorry, that includes players, but also includes whatever staff would deal with strictly on field. So the physio wouldn't, but the set piece coach would. It's the Premier League is setting theirs at 85% of the revenue that you earn, and that includes the TV rights, whatever shirts you sell. It also includes the TV money, which is a big portion of the money. But the UEFA's rule, financial fair play, is 70% over a year-long period, right? So if you're in Europe, you can spend 70% of the revenue you bring in. If you're not in Europe, coincidentally, you can actually spend more money if you bring in more money. So that's a funny old thing. I mean, I'd have to imagine, because Arsenal allegedly are 62% by their SCR, and I know they don't spend as much money as they do, but or as much money as some of these other teams in the Premier League, which is kind of funny in terms of their wage bill. But I can't imagine Manchester United's in that big of trouble. Moving to a team who definitely, or what do you have to say?
Just to sort of clarify, if we're going based off of UEFA rules, I know we're in 2026, but in 2025, Manchester United generated 666.5 million pounds in a revenue. So, for example, if they were to follow a similar trend this year, which I imagine they would, 70% of that would be 466.55 million pounds at their disposal. So they have that amount of
Yes.
money to play with, but it's really up to how much Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe are going to want to spend out of that money, because they were operating at a net 30 million pound loss at the end of last year.
Yeah.
Finances and the inverted microphone. Welcome.
Finances, yes. Their payroll currently is 163 million, so they have 300 million to split between transfer fees and managerial. I don't know. We're not going to break down everything there. Elliot Anderson, he is a player that I personally would like to see at Manchester United. I think he fits Manchester United perfectly alongside Mateus Fernandes or Ederson, whoever it may be there. But because football doesn't work that way, Elliot Anderson looks to be heading toward the Premier League side known as Manchester City, who are definitely listening to what we were talking about SCR, PSR, and FFP, and saying, how do we break all of that? 100 million roughly is kind of the number that's been thrown around. Who knows what it will end up being, but Elliot Anderson is one of the highest potential midfielders in the world. He's 23 years old. He does everything really, really well. And for the first purchase of the Enzo Maresca era, this would be a really, really good move from Manchester City's perspective. Joa'o, I'm curious to get your thoughts on Elliot Anderson, just in general, but also his move to Man City.
I think that Elliot Anderson is a player who has really demonstrated what he can do on the pitch this year. I think that he's been absolutely phenomenal for Nottingham Forest in league. He was 38, 4-4, yes, but he was a player who Nottingham Forest could always count on. And I think that that's going to transfer. And I think that as he progresses throughout his career, he's only 23. He is going to become a monster. He is going to be someone who is defensively going to be a rock for your side, but also as he gets paired with better wingers, strikers, goal scorers. For example, if he gets put on a team with Braut Erling Haaland and he gives him a good ball, he scores, we can see great things come out, and it just depends on where he goes, right? But if he goes City, this man is set for the rest of his Premier League career. I really do believe that, just because he's shown at a club like Nottingham with better pieces and, better facilities, better whatever you want to say, he will thrive wherever he goes, and I can guarantee that.
Yeah, and for City's perspective, they absolutely need the help in midfield, right? Because Nico Gonzalez hasn't been great this season. Bernardo Silva's heading out. Mateo Kovacic is old. Excuse me, geez. The list goes on and on. Calvin Phillips is still apparently with Man City. I forgot about him. Bless his heart. 3 appearances with Sheffield United this season. He did make an appearance in the Carabao Cup for City, so good for him. Good for him. Who remembers when he was good? I do. Again, I think this is a move that shows, hey, City aren't going to just sit back and rebuild slowly under Enzo Maresca. They are going to get after it immediately. Spending 100 million obviously isn't too big of a deal nowadays, but bringing in a guy like Elliot Anderson is a statement of intent. And if you're Enzo Maresca, you've got to hit the ground running now. You know, there are no excuses. We saw what happened with Arne Slot. They have a big money transfer window. They underperform, and now he's on LinkedIn looking for a job like the rest of us. So not great there. We'll see. We'll see how the ball rolls. I don't know. That wasn't great, but Arne Slot. We'll talk about that. Do we want to talk about that before we go to the World Cup?
I think it's something that has sort of passed already. I'm more intrigued to see if Arne Slot has the open to work banner on his LinkedIn
Oh,
profile
absolutely.
picture. But I mean, I think that's old news. I think that's something that's gone on. I do think that Liverpool's transfers and sort of what they're linked with is very interesting. Um, they are being linked with Ellie Junior Krupi once again, and they are being linked with Jan Diomande as well. So, wingers possibly going to Anfield this season will be dangerous, will be exciting for Liverpool. But again, they are going to splash cash again. And if it doesn't end up working for them, questions are going to start being asked.
It's funny that the 2 names you mentioned that Liverpool have been linked with, which are the only 2 names that I've seen Liverpool linked with at all, are both attacking players, right? Liverpool's issue last season was certainly their attack in some respect, but their back line is bad, right? Ibrahim Konate just signed for Real Madrid. That leaves a very old Virgil van Dijk. It leaves the right back situation of Jeremy Frimpong and an injured Connor Bradley. Left back Milos Kerkez, who had an awful debut season with Liverpool last year. And then the midfield's not great either. McAllister hasn't been good for a while. Gravenberch doesn't quite fit in the system. So we'll see. That's a topic for later this year. Not ages away, but fairly soon. The World Cup. I don't know if you've heard of this competition. 48 teams take place, travel to the United States, Canada, and Mexico to ply their trade in the football. It starts next Thursday, which I cannot believe I'm saying that aloud. The World Cup starts next Thursday, Joa'o Lara Jr., and not the World Cup of Darts, which is showing up for some reason when I search it on Wikipedia. And for some reason, I'm also on the German Wikipedia. Very weird from me there. I apologize. But
Is it time for a German segment?
no, absolutely not. Never. But Joao, Mexico kicks off the tournament. Why? Because they're in Group A. We talked about in the intro. We're gonna talk about the first 6 groups. That's Group A, B, C, D, E, and F. I'd sing it in the way the alphabet song goes, but I don't want to get copyrighted. I doubt that's public domain nowadays. But Group A consists of Czechia, no longer known as the Czech Republic, no longer known as Czechoslovakia, just Czechia, Mexico, South Africa, and South Korea. Joa'o Lara Jr., you're a Mexican fan, a Mexico fan. You are a Mexican fan technically, but you're also a Mexico fan. That's the correct wording. Thoughts on the group? We'll go team by team, more of a breakdown, but just overall thoughts on how that group could look.
Look, Mexico just recently played against Ghana, won that game 2-0, won 1-0 against Australia. I like the direction that this team is going. I like how there's a mix of Liga MX players, but not only that, European players, and it's been the European players who have shown their leadership. I think that will allow these younger players that are coming in to grow and eventually help their careers. Now, look, Mexico in this group, it is not going to be easy. I have my fears. I have my doubts. Why? Because this team has let me down before in the past, and you can't sleep on any of these teams in the group because again, South Africa, not the best team, but they have a couple of young startlets that will surprise you. And historically, they've been gritty. They shocked Mexico in 2010 as well. South Korea, Mexico's faced off against them before, 2018, if I'm not wrong, and it
Yeah.
was just a nitty gritty match. Mexico struggled until Chicharito ended up finding the back of the net that game. Obviously, Heung-min Son scores an absolute banger. Mexico ends up winning it, but you can't underestimate them. And then Czechia, a team that features in the World Cup, they're a mixed team. They're young, but I think as well you can't underestimate them because they can put on the surprise. And there's just been a lot of delusion around this Mexico team. Do I like the names on it? Yes, there are names that are on there, that deserve to be there. Not like before when you had players like Charlie Rodriguez hopping up each and every time for a freaking selection. I'm not gonna cuss, but it's just so frustrating to see players who aren't worthy of being on a squad there. But I don't see that this time. All of these names deserve to be here. And again, I think this squad is going to be exciting.
Yeah, I share that sentiment. I am excited to see all the home nations in this World Cup. Well, let's pick out a few players from each team and then predict the group, like how the group finishes. I mean, you look at Czechia. Patrick Schick is in there. Did he ever kind of fulfill what we kind of thought he would? Probably not. But is he still very good when he puts on the international shirt? Absolutely. I mean, Euro 2021, he had that outrageous goal, 25 goals in 52 appearances for Czechia. So a guy you've got to watch out for. But they also have Vladimir Kufal, who played for West Ham for quite a while. So there's some pieces there. They do, again, have young pieces as well. Adam Hlozek. They've got Thomas Suchek, an older guy. There's some quality in there that could certainly pose some trouble. And a lot of players from Slavia Prague. So a lot of players that will have chemistry with one another. So that could be interesting to see. Mexico, Joao. I'm going to point out one name. I'm only going to point him out because he could have played for the United States men's national team and because I have a funny story about him. It's not really funny. It's just a story. Obed Vargas. I saw him play when he was with the United States U23 team. It was a pre-Olympic friendly. I can't remember if this was before or after the game against Mexico or Japan. They played both teams in Phoenix Rising Football Club Stadium at 38th Street in Washington, a glorious venue for three teams preparing to go to the Olympics in Paris, France. So, but Obed Vargas, we talked to him after the game. We made some conversations, just be like, oh, what are your thoughts on the match? Typical post-game questions. And then the question obviously got asked because he is eligible to play for the U.S. and Mexico. What do you prefer? He said at that time he wanted to play for United States. He wanted to play for. He didn't give some answer like a lot of team players give in the youth camps, being like, "Oh, well, I'm open for whatever." He said he wanted to play for the U.S. and here he is playing for Mexico. So that kind of breaks my heart. Joao, thoughts on the rest of the Mexican squad?
Look, I think that this squad, once again, they have players who are in Europe. They have players who yes, they are not exactly the best players in the world, but they show heart, they show passion, and I think these teams can go far if they work together in a cohesive manner. Johan Vasquez, I think, is going to be a leader for this squad this year. He's someone who can take up a captain role just in case if either Cesar Montes doesn't come back on time. I know he had a little muscle contusion. Edson Alvarez, I don't know if he'll start this World Cup cycle just because there is a lot of good names on this squad. But even then, Brian Gonzalez, I think, is one to watch out for. If he goes on the pitch like a sub, or even then in the starting 11, he is someone who can control that mid for you. Or even then, if you want to play him at the left mid or right mid, he's explosive. He loves to take on, can put in a good pass. And it's great that he has his teammate Armando Gonzalez in the squad as well, because if he finds him, he'll find one of the most informed strikers in Mexico. Or if not, you have options like Santiago Jimenez or Raul Jimenez, who will be there to be able to just push that ball in the back of the net.
Brian Gutierrez, another player that played in those USA U23 friendlies I saw. So a little bit emotional, breaks my heart quite a
Don't cry.
lot. I'm trying not to, Joao. I really am. South Africa, you mentioned they're a very young team. They do have Lyle Foster, who is now relegated from the Premier League, but has been with Burnley for quite a bit. They've got some other pieces there that could really look to use this World Cup as a bouncing board to Europe. A handful of guys in MLS, which could be interesting. But I think the team that Mexico and all three teams, the other teams in this group, need to look out for is South Korea. South Korea had a very good World Cup last time out. They're a very good squad. They've got Kim Min-jae at the back, Son Heung-min in the attack. There's some other good pieces in there as well. Cho Gae-sung had a great World Cup in Qatar. Lee Kang-in is with PSG, although for not much longer, it seems. That is a team that can be a real threat for Mexico. They play each other on the final day. I'm curious to get your thoughts on how South Korea would look in this group.
Again, this South Korean side, I think it has a lot of potential. And here's the thing: South Korea has grown since the last time they faced Mexico in a World Cup. There's more players going out to Europe, and even then, there are players in each and every position that hey, they can make an impact. I think Kim Min Jae will be one of those players for South Korea defensively. And then obviously, you have players like Sung Hyo Pike, who plays for Birmingham City. I'm sorry if I'm messing up the pronunciations.
I
I'm
think you're
trying
doing a
my
good job.
best.
You're doing a good job.
But there's players in each and every position that can change this game. And South Korea has always been this fast squad, this cohesive squad, this very disciplined side. And I think that's going to be something that benefits them, especially in a group against Mexico. And that's why teams like Mexico can't sleep against them. They can't take a moment off because South Korea is going to be on them each and every moment of this game.
I agree. It's definitely a team that is going to pose a lot of challenges for whoever faces them in this World Cup. I'm going to give my predictions now. You can follow up on if you agree or disagree. In first place in Group A, I have South Korea because of the quality in attack, midfield, and defense that we mentioned. It has the most quality up and down the pitch out of anyone in this group. In second place, I have Mexico. I think my good friends Obed Vargas and Brian Gutierrez, if they play, will do numbers for them. But also, again, the quality you mentioned, that the players in Europe that Mexico has, it's a good squad. It's a great squad, no, but it's a good squad. And then in third place, I think it's because of the youth, because of the question marks surrounding them, because we don't really know what this team will be. I have South Africa as my third spot, and then Czechia finishing last. Joao, what's your predictions?
Look, ignore the flag on my wall.
Oh
Ignore the
God.
jersey on my wall. I honestly think that the first two games Mexico is going to struggle, but I think they end up winning in a very ugly fashion. I think they do get 6 points there, and then draw against South Korea on the last day. I think they do just enough. I think they tie on points with South Korea for first, but it just depends on the goal differential. But it could be either or. But if I have to be definite, I have to go Mexico, South Korea. But again, I don't think by a lot. After that, I have to go with Czechia. I think that this team has all the quality in the places that they need, and they have these young talents, and even then they have safety in the net as well with Matej Kobar. And I just, again, there's so much uncertainty about South Africa, but I think they put up a good fight, but it's just not enough to continue on in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, again, it would certainly make a lot of sense for how that goes down. Moving forward to Group B, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Canada, Qatar, and Switzerland. It's a very weird group. It could have been a lot better had Italy qualified. It would have been a lot worse if Wales had qualified. But Bosnia and Herzegovina, they won the playoff spot. They've got another player who I watched in those USA U23 friendlies, Esmir Baraktarovic. He scored the winning penalty goal. I can't remember how that game went down, but he scored the winner.
Penalty.
Penalty, yes, it was for Bosnia to qualify for this World Cup. They also have Edin Dzeko, who is just 40 years old, no big deal. Sead Kolasinac, also a former Arsenal guy, in there as well. So a lot of fun names on this team. A little bit of youth in there sprinkled in with the elderly. Then looking at Canada, Jesse Marsh, traitor. Not really. I don't like Jesse Marsh because he's not a good manager, but he's also an American coaching Canada. Then Qatar, they all but one of their players plays in the Qatari league. The one that doesn't plays for a team named Cultural Leonosa in Spain. They are in the third division, I believe that is. So hey, good for him. But and then rounding out the group is Switzerland. I think again, we'll take a quick peek at Canada. Obviously, they do have good pieces there because I mean they wouldn't be here without it. They've got Jonathan David, who is one of the better strikers in CONCACAF. Is he in good form consistently? No, but is he a good player? Yes. Alphonso Davies, the captain of the squad, he plays pretty much anywhere on the pitch when he plays in a Canada shirt. So we'll see where he plays in these games. And then looking at Switzerland, I think this is the team that you almost have to pick to win this group because honestly, just because of one guy, but also the other guys in the squad, but mainly Granit Xhaka. Then behind him in the back line, you've got Manuel Kanji. There's Ricardo Rodriguez is only 33, but he's in the squad. Brilliant Bolo, if he gets his visa, should be on the plane and should be a good contributor up top. But if not, they've got Ruben Vargas, Noah Okafor. So I'm just going to jump to predictions because this is a very boring group, to be honest with you, with not much storylines. Switzerland won. I think Canada will have a boost because they're the home nation. They'll go 2. Bosnia 3, Qatar 4.
Oof. I like that. I was going similar, except I was going Switzerland 1, Bosnia 2. I think that for 3 and 4, it's more of a toss up than what you think. I think that this Qatari side, yes, they're not the best on paper, but again, I think players playing in the same league helps out a lot just because they know their tendencies. They sort of interact better, and if you want to get into the terms of pride for your country, that could be something. I think that they have good pieces in attack with Ali Almoez and Aziz Al Afif. I think that those are two players that can change the game for Qatar. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have to go Canada 3, Qatar 4.
Yeah. Again, it's hard to back this Qatari side after seeing what they did in 2022. Group C, a little bit more interesting now. We've got Brazil. We've spoke quite in depth about their squad, how painfully mid it is. Haiti, who's coming off a 4-0 win over New Zealand. Then Morocco, who are third place or fourth place in last World Cup. And then Scotland. Nothing good to say about Scotland. I think, listen, Haiti's not a very good side. All right, we'll get that out of the way. When you have multiple USL championship players on your team, it's hard to back you, right? And one of those being Carl Saint, who's given the number 6. It's really hard to back you after seeing what he did in a Phoenix Rising shirt. Morocco, we know the quality. They technically won AFCON. Really, they didn't. But again, you have guys who play for Real Madrid, Manchester United. Like I know it's Brahim Diaz and Mazraoui I'm talking about there, but still, they've got quality up and down the pitch. And then Scotland, I think they might be able to sneak out because they've got some quality. But my prediction for this, Brazil 2, Morocco 1. See I pump faked you there. Morocco 1, Brazil 2, Scotland 3, Haiti 4.
I agree. I totally agree, and you got me there. I was about to say, Reese, are you sure? I think that it's not obvious because both sides are very similar. I think that Morocco does have a lot of standout pieces. So does Brazil, But the way that Morocco plays, with the intensity and the passion that they play with, they can upset any side on any given day. I wouldn't be surprised if they beat Brazil, but also again, it could go both ways. Brazil beats Morocco. I'm not surprised. Morocco beats Brazil. It just depends on what they it sort of comes along to be. And look, Brazil just came off from beating, yes, it's Panama 6-2, but it seems to be that they have something going on offensively. So yeah, I totally agree. Morocco, Brazil, Scotland, Haiti. There's no other way really to it.
Yeah. And Carlos Harvey, former Phoenix Rising player, scored an absolute banger to make it 6-2. It was 6-1 in like the 80th minute. Carlos Harvey, like 30 yards out, absolute screamer. Moving forward to Group D, more interesting because of how wide open it is. You've got Australia in there, who had a very good World Cup in 2022, getting out of a group with France, Denmark, and I believe it was Tunisia, the last team in there. Then you've got Paraguay, who have some very fascinating pieces. Are they a perfect squad? No, but are they a fun squad? I hope so, because, I mean, the names on it, Diego Gomez, who plays for Brighton, Miguel Almiron, back in MLS with Atlanta, Julio Enciso, never quite panned out with Brighton, but still a very fun player to watch. Then Turkey, who have a good squad, not a great squad, but again, you've got Arda Güler, Kenan Yildiz. There are players in this team who can make a difference for Turkey to get out of the group. And then the last team is the third and final host, the United States, who will certainly be looking to get out of the group. I think this is a group where you could honestly put the four teams in any order and you would have a realistic prediction. I think it's not unfair to say that, because I think a lot of people are discounting the quality that Paraguay possesses. Again, is it a perfect side? No. But is it a good side? Absolutely. Joao, I'm curious to get your thoughts on any of the teams here, but also what your predictions may or may not be.
Look, I'll jump straight into the prediction just because you touched on these teams sort of a bit. I think that Turkey tops this group. I really do. I think that with the quality that they have with their European players, again, you mentioned the Kenan Yildiz, Arda Güler, I think that's enough to propel them to that number one spot. Not only that, I think that a lot of players that they have in their domestic league, they're not the best exactly, but I think they can get it done against Australia. Paraguay is in one of the worst shapes that they've been in a while. The U.S., yes, they're a decent side this year, but they're not great. They're very similar to Mexico in that sense. So I have to go Turkey. If there's a little bit of World Cup magic, I could see Australia going second, U.S. third, and Paraguay going fourth.
Again, as I said, I don't think that's an unrealistic prediction. Again, Australia, they do have some good players there, but they also have the worst storyline in the World Cup. Christian Volpato, very good prospect, was in the Italian youth system, never got the call up to the first team, so he decides to go, like literally 3 days ago, goes, I'll play for Australia finally. I think that's a little weak. But my prediction is Turkey 1. I'm following you there. I'm having USA 2 because I think being host in a World Cup, I think the only time a host hasn't gotten out of the group was Qatar, and I don't think the US deserves to be put on the same pedestal as them. And then Australia 3, Paraguay 4.
I just think that it's different. I just think the situation with Qatar and US is much different, just because the US is in a much more difficult group where one slip up could just cost them the whole tournament. Again, the good thing about this World Cup is that there is, the best 13 place advances, so they have that safety net. But I think those are two completely different situations.
Fair enough. I was just more using it as a statistical point rather than a example. Regardless, I found out irregardless isn't actually a word, so that kind of broke my heart. But regardless, the 2026 World Cup moving forward, Group E. right? That's where we were accidentally closed the tab. Yes, Group E, they possess Joao and I's favorite player, Joel Margarita for Curacao. He is one of 26 Curacao players. He is one of 25 Curacao players that were born in the Netherlands. So, not exactly. I mean, it's kind of what's going to happen when you have a territory that features a big diaspora shifting. So it makes sense. But they're not in for a good time in the World Cup because they have Ecuador, they have Germany, and they have the Ivory Coast, who I have struggled so much with my thinking on these predictions. I've flip flopped Ecuador, I flip flopped Ivory Coast. Where should each of these teams be? Because Ecuador, their defense is absolutely absurd. You have Piero Hincapié, who is played as a left back, but will probably be a center back for Ecuador in this World Cup. Then you have William Pacho, who is the second or third best center back in the world, depending on who you ask. In front of him, as the six, you've got Moise Caicedo, who is one of the best sixes in the world. There's so much quality at the back of the pitch that it's hard to pick against Ecuador. But then the Ivory Coast, they've got quality as well. They've got a lot of older guys as well. Seiko Fofana, Frank Kessie, who are in the midfield. But in the attack, you've got Yan Diomande, Joa'o, Nicolas Pepe's in there as well. So a lot of fun pieces around this group. And then the German side, which we have spoke about in depth before today. Joao, how bad do you feel for Curacao knowing that that's their group?
This is similar to when Tunisia was in the World Cup for the first time. Or I don't know if it was for the first time, but Tunisia in the World Cup a couple of editions back ago. And the same thing with Panama when they're just getting battered by England and they score that one goal and they're acting like they've won the World Cup. It's sort of that situation, but 20 times worse. Just because Curacao is they're not known for football. I don't know what they're known for, but once again, they are beaches, But we're playing football. We're not going to the beach, unfortunately, unless if you're Curacao
Pastel-colored
after the
Dutch
group
colonial
stage.
architecture, world-class scuba diving, and pristine, secluded beaches.
Okay, so again, things that aren't related to football. Now, look, I know you asked me about Curacao, but I'm just gonna jump into the group. I am pretty defined on Ecuador at that two spot. I don't think they beat Germany, but I do think they are good enough to beat Curacao. I think they're good enough to beat Ivory Coast, as you mentioned. Now look, we touched this topic before when we talked about the Champions League final. A 10 out of 10 defense is better than a 10 out of 10 offense.
Yeah.
And I don't think Ivory Coast is close to a 10 out of 10 offense. I think they're maybe, a 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10. But if these players, unite again and I think national pride is a big thing because they play with this never seen before passion and grit and they leave everything all out on the pitch. But I still don't think it's enough to go through this back line that, again, has a lot of good names on it. And even then, they have players as well that are going to be able to contribute defensively on the pitch, even though they're not defenders like Moises Caicedo. So again, I have to go Germany 1, Ecuador 2, Ivory Coast 3, and Curacao 4.
I agree. That's my exact prediction as well. I think looking to break down this Ecuador defense is going to be an impossible task. I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that they've got the best center back pairing in this group. It probably could be in the World Cup. I'd have to think about it's probably not better than France, but it's definitely better than what Germany have in Antonio Rudiger and Jonathan Tah, assuming that's what they deploy. You do have Nico Schlotterbeck in there as well, but still nothing impressive. Group F, this is going to be a fun group. This is going to be a group where 3 of the 4 teams can win this group. The first, Japan. The second, the Netherlands and Sweden, and then Tunisia. Tunisia, bless their hearts. Thank you for showing up to the World Cup. We'll help you pack your bags in like 2 weeks' time when you're out. But Japan. It's hard to pick out too many players from Japan because yes, there's Wataru Endo, Ao Tanaka, Daichi Kamada, who played really well for their respective Premier League clubs over the years. But there's also a lot of names that, and Takafusa Kuba, Rito Duon, who have played well abroad. But Japan isn't one where you see much individuality. You see the squad, the 26 men that go to that World Cup bearing the Japan flag, come together and get results. Is what they did in Qatar when they were in a group with Spain, Germany, and Costa Rica. They won that group. So I think they're a team that you can't not look out for. The Netherlands, we've spoke about them before. And then Sweden, coached by Graham Potter, they've got such a good squad, or they've got such good pieces. I don't know if they have a good squad because they've got Lucas Bergvall, they've got Alexander Isak, Anthony Alanga. They've also got Victor Gyökeres in there. I'm intrigued to see where their finish would be. Joao Lara Jr., what's your prediction for it?
Look, again, we have to get Tunisia out of the way. I hope you enjoy your carne asada Monterrey. I hope you enjoy the riverfront and the barbecue in Kansas City because I don't think there's any possibility for them. No disrespect to them, but just look at the group you're in. Look, if we're looking at these teams who are competing in Japan, Netherlands, and Sweden, it could go either way for these three. But I think that Japan has that I don't know edge to them. They
Yes.
they have they have that sort of advantage to them because of their youth, because of the way they play football, the way they are technical and the way they join together and link up to make a good project. I think that they can beat a lot of these teams in the competition on a good day. So I have to go with them number one. I don't see this going anywhere else. Now for 2 and 3, this is where you can sort of switch them around, right? Because you look at Sweden, you've mentioned names already, and then obviously you have players like Victor Gyökeres, Alexander Isak, which I think is unfair if you're playing a 4-4-2, or if you're playing something where you're switching in and out strikers, or you're playing two strikers. That's dangerous, right? And I like how this team is sort of composed around every position. You have great players, a striker. You have decent players in the midfield. You have some good players in the defense as well. The keeper obviously is a big question, but I think that's what puts them over the Netherlands, because the Netherlands, as good as they are, I just think that they lack that depth. If it's the 75th minute and they need someone to come on, I think Sweden is going to have more of an impact than the Netherlands. Again, I'm not really that high on them. Yes, there's a lot of great teams on this list, but I have to put them in third in this group. That might be bold, right?
I do think it is bold, but I have to agree as well because what we talked about before with this Netherlands squad, excuse me, their backline's so good. Whoever's in goal for them is very good. Their midfield's where it kind of starts to go downhill. Yes, Frankie de Jong's in there, Ryan Gravenberch, but they're not great, right? They might be able to beat Tunisia, but will they be able to get past the Sweden or Japan? I don't know. And then you look at the forwards they're bringing. It's just such a brutal group. And not in a good way. Wout Weghorst, Memphis Depay, Cody Gakpo, Noah Long, Daniel Mallon, Brian Brobby, and then Crescencio Somerville is not a great group. And it's not really at any fault of their own. So I don't know. I just struggle to see them scoring the goals. So I agree with that prediction.
So again, again, all I heard there was pressing striker, TikTok edit, and something else in the attack, and that's gonna be very difficult for the Netherlands, and it's just difficult, right? Because they were in their golden generation the last World Cup, I want to say, or even then, maybe 2 World Cups ago, because everyone was riding that high. And they played great, but I just don't think it's the same for them. And I think this is the start of a very ugly decline for this Dutch team.
Yeah, I mean, again, we'll have to see. I mean, I just don't know if they can kind of abandon that Dutch style of football to make things work there. I don't know. It is an old team as well. You mentioned that. They're in terms of outfield players, there's nobody under the age of 24 that got called up to the squad, which is pretty unprecedented for a team of this stature in the World Cup. We'll come back next week with groups G, H, I, J, K, and L. And then we'll predict how things will go as well. We'll kind of tally up things, and it should be a fun time. But that'll be next week. Joao, any last thoughts to say about anything in the world?
World Cup should be exciting. If you're gonna bet responsibly. If you're gonna drink responsibly, and have fun. We'll see you next week. Reese, what you got?
Well, I've got the outro. Joao, follow you at Joao Lara Jr. on Twitter, correct? Correct.
Two
He
thumbs up.
thumbs
Yep.
up. Two thumbs up. Beautiful, beautiful. And a smile. Follow me on Twitter at Rees Goodall. Follow the inverted microphone at the inverted mic on Twitter, at the inverted microphone everywhere else. But hey, this podcast, we're changing the outro thing. I thought of this thing earlier. We're gonna test it out. We're gonna give it a trial run. This podcast, not bad for a couple of fat guys, huh?